So, the topic of our discussion today is what I call the silent autoimmunity explosion. And the reason I'm calling it silent is because this may be the single biggest epidemic in the world today, and yet you're hearing very little about it in the media and from your mainstream health providers, even natural health providers. I don't think are quite as aware of this as they need to be. My plan is to sort of clue you in on the exponentially growing problem here, and also to help you understand the mechanisms that drive it a little bit and what kinds of things you can do to mitigate the effects of this. So we have a lot to cover anyway, so let's get to it. So, autoimmune disease is basically an attack by your immune system on your own tissues. And no matter what tissue is affected, though, the primary problem isn't whatever that tissue is. It's your immune system that needs to be addressed. Now, as a collective whole, autoimmune disease right now is officially recognized as the #3 cause of morbidity and mortality in the entire industrialized world, right behind cancer and heart disease. It may be, though, an initiating factor even in those two things. There's some overlap there. I think that there seems to be evidence to suggest that it may even be a much bigger problem, in fact, than cancer and heart disease combined. The American Autoimmune Disease Related Disease Association has basically estimated that there are roughly 53 million Americans now suffering from autoimmune diseases, and compare that to an estimated maybe 9 million people with cancer, another 22 million people with cardiovascular disease. We're looking at something greater than those two combined. So, and according to them, 1 in every 12 women, 1 in every 24 men estimated to have an autoimmune disease. That number may be as high as 1 in every 8 women and 1 in every 12 men, according to an NIH statistic I got a look at. And they both, estimate about 50 some odd million people right now. So this is, and the other issue is that polyautoimmunity, where you have more than one autoimmune condition simultaneously, that's rapidly becoming the norm. Very scary. So why the conflicting and confusing disparity in all the official numbers? And this is, it's a very confusing topic. And the answer is simple, because the standards, in part because the standards of diagnosis are so abysmal. And the standards, for instance, with respect to celiac disease, which, depending on who you talk to, either celiac disease or Hashimoto's are the #1 autoimmune, disorder. Celiac disease is only recognized by mainstream medicine as something that's an enteropathic condition. In other words, something that's existing in the gut. And you're only diagnosable with celiac disease if it's, #1, intestinally based, which most of the time it's not. 8 out of 10 celiac patients don't even exhibit gastrointestinal symptoms. And also, we have these little villi inside our small intestine and microvilli. And as during the course of enteropathic celiac disease, these things begin to erode away, and what eventually happens is that this, what looks like shag carpeting on the inside of your gut turns into Berber carpeting. Only when this has completely transformed into this are you diagnosable with celiac disease. If you get an intestinal biopsy, God forbid, and it looks like this, you're fine, go home, have some bread. There's a standard of diagnosis for you. To be producing antibodies, for instance, against your own adrenal tissue, which I'm here to tell you is not uncommon at all. I look at these things every single day. I do a lot of immunologic testing. I have access to very accurate immunologic testing. And yet you're not diagnosable with what is called Addison's disease until a minimum, again, this is the medical standard of diagnosis, until a minimum of 90% tissue destruction has occurred. So if you're only at half that, say 45% tissue destruction, I promise you will notice this in every part of the way you feel and function in your life, and you will have no answers. You're going to think that you've burned out your adrenals, you've got adrenal exhaustion, and yet there's absolutely no answer for you until it's too late to do anything about it, all right? And, finally, Hashimoto's disease, which is autoimmune thyroid, many people are not aware that anywhere, and again, depending on who you talk to, from 80 to 95% of all low-functioning thyroid cases are autoimmune in nature. And you aren't likely, it's not likely that your physician is going to care that much to bother to test you for thyroid antibodies in that instance, in part because it's not going to change the way that they treat you. And number two, they have literally nothing to offer you if that's what you're presenting with, which in all overwhelming number of cases, that's what you're presenting with. So they can make your labs look prettier by putting you on levothyroxine or something like that, and yet you may still have every single symptom that you had prior to the medication, and your labs look better, and that's all they care about, and you go home and you're wondering why you still have, to quote the cover of Dr. Karazian's book, why you still have thyroid symptoms when all your lab tests are normal.